Mountain Hill Radio contains graphic language and scenes some listeners may find troubling. Listener discretion is advised. Everything you are about to hear is absolutely fictional. The town of Mountain Hill is just that, a town. The people of Mountain Hill are just people, and never has there been a true case of a monster stealing a human's skin. The forests do not contain fairy creatures from another world, the streets are not terrorized by monsters who only come out at night, and the water is perfectly safe to swim in. You're safe here, we promise. This is Mountain Hill Radio. Hello and happy day, dear citizens of Mountain Hill. The weather today is a pleasant 73 degrees, the sky is partly cloudy, and the sun will set at around 7:23 p.m. Don't forget to be inside with the doors locked and the windows shut tight before then. This is your friendly reminder to check the salt beneath your windowsills and to make sure that iron horseshoe you have hanging over your front door is up to the standards the Mountain Hill Sheriff Station expects. Sheriff Thornton has sent out a reminder that anyone out past curfew can expect to spend the night in a cell. No need to be out past curfew, folks. Let's not get Tilly involved, alright? Let's just make sure to have those wards in place before 7 o'clock tonight, just to be on the safe side. Today's story is brought to you by Lost Fiction, your local shop for every used book you could ever dream of. Be sure to stop by with any book you'd like to trade in, and Renford or his new shopkeeper will happily make an exchange for you. Lost Fiction, located on Ashton Avenue. A red 1953 DeSoto Fire Dome pulls down Ashton Avenue, kicking up a bit of dust as the driver makes their way into town. The driver, whoever they may be, is new to Mountain Hill. The speed limit on Ashton Avenue is 35 miles per hour, but this newcomer takes their time, taking in the sights and sounds of our small, bustling mountain town. Though no one in Mountain Hill knows who this stranger is, there was word a couple weeks ago that Mr. Renford Bell, the owner of Lost Fiction, decided to rent out that old apartment above his shop in downtown to a new employee he hired to help run things. Renford was prompted by his wife, Mrs. Bell, to take a little time off from the bookstore and explore the beautiful woods surrounding our lovely little town. Though Renford vehemently disagreed at first, it seems Mrs. Bell was finally able to get through to him. The stranger slows to a stop before the aforementioned bookstore, pulling into one of the many angled parking spaces that has nearly completely faded from view. No one climbs out of the vehicle for several minutes, as though whoever is inside is taking time to prepare themselves for this new adventure. The engine's rumbling dies suddenly as the car is turned off, and finally, the driver's side door opens and one light-washed, skinny jeans-clad leg appears. The woman who climbs out of the old car is young, hardly even 25 years old, but she looks as though she carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her long brown hair is pulled into a ponytail. The bangs she cut herself in a fit of existential dread-filled rage fall awkwardly across her brow line, though somehow the look suits her. It will take several weeks for her to get used to the bangs, and several months longer before she decides to grow them out. For now, though, she has bangs, and she has no idea what she is doing in this town in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Lorana Lynette Myers, known simply as Lyra to anyone she introduces herself to, stands before Lost Fiction and questions herself for what has to be the 7,000th time if she is really doing the right thing. Leaving behind everything she has ever known and loved? Easy. Almost pathetically easy if she wants to be honest with herself. But starting fresh in a town no one has ever heard of, a town that simply does not exist on any map Lyra could find, a town which has absolutely no cell service, nor internet, In a day and age where it's as easy as pressing a few buttons to be able to order groceries delivered to your doorstep without ever having to get up off the couch, or ordering a product online from across the country and receiving it within 48 hours, it is one of the more impulsive and reckless decisions Lyra has ever made, though it certainly won't be her last. Lyra gathers her purse from her car and shuts the door, dropping the keys into the bag. She takes a deep breath as if to brace herself and says, "Let's do this," before setting off for the front door of Lost Fiction. The bell above the door jingles as she steps into the cool air of the building. The smell of old books lingers in the air, and Lyra finds herself breathing in the scent deeply. This bookstore smells like a place she could only dream of late nights and cozy warmth as she curled up with a good book by the fireplace in her childhood home. It smells like a past that is worth remembering, and Lyra welcomes it gladly over the past she wishes she could forget entirely. The walls are lined with shelves, which are in turn lined with hundreds of books. There are paperbacks and hardcovers of all different genres. From just glancing at the shelf directly to her right, Lyra spots an old favorite, a horror novel she often read as a child about an evil clown who terrorizes a small community. She hasn't read it in years, and adds it to her list of things she would like to do once she is settled in. The rest of the store is simple. The walls are painted red, the flooring is hardwood, with rugs of all shapes and sizes and colors strewn about. The place feels cozy, with a couple of chairs placed sporadically through the store for anyone meandering through the aisles to sit down and read or relax for a moment. The counter holding the cash register sits to her left, piled high with books and various flyers for the other businesses in town. Lyra knows, without a doubt, she will love working here. As the door shuts behind her, Lyra hears a man call, "Just a moment. Browse all you like, I'll be right up." She recognizes his voice as the man she spoke with about the apartment rental a few short weeks ago. "Mr. Bell," she says, stepping further into the room. "My name is Lyra. I'm here about the apartment." Before she can finish that sentence, Lyra hears a crash come from somewhere in the back of the shop. She rushes forward, finding a door in the back ajar and leading to a set of stairs. As she steps through the threshold, she looks up just in time to see a man who appears to be in his early 60s with graying hair and a close-shaved beard, struggling with several boxes at the top of the stairs. Books lie haphazardly all around him, some having bounced down several steps to land at the foot of the stairs. "Oh dear," he mutters. "I'd hoped to have all this cleaned up before you arrived. Sorry about this mess. Just give me a moment and I'll be right down." Do you need any help?" Lyra asks, though she has already set her purse down and begun scooping up books. "Though the polite gentleman in me says to tell you to sit tight, the old man I've become would very much appreciate the help. Thank you." Lyra helps Mr. Bell clean up the books and unload several boxes from where he had stored them in the apartment above the shop. As they work, they talk, and Mr. Bell tells her the various duties she will perform as she works. "You aren't required to do much," he explains as they bring down the last few boxes. There are several boxes of books in the apartment, all of which Mr. Bell explained were things his wife wished to read before he put them on the shelves. Lyra decides she likes Mrs. Bell, though she hasn't met her yet. "All I ask is that you respect the books and you respect the customers. You don't need to worry about cleaning up in here beyond taking care of any trash you might accumulate throughout the day. My wife will take care of all of that. As far as the apartment goes, I don't really have any rules. The space is yours for as long as you choose to live here. Decorate it how you want, get a pet if you'd like, it don't matter to me. Just make sure to keep the place clean, and when you decide to move, try to let me know at least 30 days in advance so I can get another ad out into the paper." Lyra listens intently to everything Mr. Bell tells her about opening and closing the store, trying not to let her excitement about this new position show too much. This is the first time in her entire life that Lyra's been able to choose anything for herself. Though it is easily the most terrifying thing she has ever done, it is also the most exciting. As Mr. Bell finishes explaining her various duties, in short, little to none so long as she keeps the store clean and helps customers when they walk in, he hands her 2 keys. One to the front door of the shop and one to the door that leads to the apartment above. "There's a door leading upstairs in here," he says, gesturing to the door through which they just spent an hour or so moving the book boxes downstairs. "And another door around back, up the staircase that wraps around the building. You're free to use whichever entrance you'd like. I have 2 extra copies of both keys. One set is mine, the other is my wife's. We won't enter the apartment so long as we don't have to, of course, but we will both be in and out of the shop often. My wife will be more than likely to stop by and bring you lunch. It's best not to refuse, but trust me, you won't want to. Oh, speaking of which, do you have any dietary restrictions? She wanted me to ask. She said a lot of the younger generation nowadays are vegan or vegetarian or something like that." "I'm not super picky," Lyra says. but I definitely don't like peas." Mr. Bell laughed, shaking his head. "Me neither, Miss Myers." "You can call me Lyra," she says, smiling warmly. "I prefer it." "Okay then, Lyra, but in exchange I expect you to call me Renford, alright? Mr. Bell just makes me feel old." Lyra accepts this as a fair trade, and Renford offers to help her carry her things upstairs. "I really didn't bring much," she confesses. "Just a suitcase full of clothes and a handful of books I couldn't really live without." She also brought a softball bat, though she feels a little silly now for doing so. Perhaps she'll set it by the front door later, though she doubts she'll ever use it. For now, though, she decides to leave it in her car. Despite the fact that she moved hours away from her hometown in a desperate attempt to begin anew, Renford takes that in stride and offers to carry her suitcase for her. She accepts, knowing the box full of books is much heavier and wanting to spare him a trip up the stairs with it, and leads him out to her car. Lyra is used to the comments about her car by now. Most everyone assumes it was bought with her parents' money, that she uses it as a status symbol, and that she knows absolutely nothing about cars. She has stopped letting the comments get to her, stopped hearing what other people have to say about something they know nothing about. Lyra spent the entire summer between graduating high school and starting her freshman year of college rebuilding this car. She worked day and night in her parents' garage, tearing it apart and rebuilding it piece by piece. All of the money spent was money she earned working minimum wage jobs over the summer previous and the entirety of her senior school year. Lyra never accepted money from her parents when she didn't have to, and in the case of this car, not a single dime of theirs was spent on it. It is one of her proudest achievements, one of the few things she could ever truly say is hers in this life. Everything else has been tainted by someone else who believes they know what is best for her. Lyra decides to shake the negative thoughts for today. There will be a time and a place for those, but right now, it's a new day and she's ready to start a new adventure. She's ready for Renford to say something similar to things she's heard before, but he only asks, "This is beautiful. Did you buy it like this or did you rebuild it?" And the amount of respect she feels for him already soars to new heights. "I found her in a yard," she says, smiling proudly and lightly tapping the hood of the cherry red vehicle. "She was all beaten up, practically falling apart. My parents told me she would be a waste of time, but I had been saving up for it. I used to go to the pick and pull yard when I was young and find old parts to work on my parents' vehicles with, and one day I saw this beautiful girl sitting totally neglected and asked the owner how much she would be. He named a price which, to be totally honest, was way less than she was worth, but I didn't point that out. I think he just wanted her gone. He told me she was an eyesore. She'd been sitting out in the yard for years, but she was in the furthest back corner and he said it was more of a hassle just to dump her. So I told him I would be back in a few years with the amount of money he named. We shook on it, and sure enough, she was still there when I went back for her. I paid in cash, he helped me tow her out of there and back to my parents' place, and I spent that entire summer working on her. I love her." Renford whistles appreciatively and nods. "She is a beauty. Did you ever name her?" Lyra smiles proudly, eyes sparkling with the remembered thrill that rebuilding her caused. "Her name is Magnolia." "A fine name." Renford smiles back and gestures to the back seat. "Shall we?" Renford follows Lyra up the stairs and back into the apartment, carrying the box of books. She told him it was okay just to bring the suitcase, but the moment he realized how many books she actually brought with her, he refused to let her carry them. Lyra realized quickly it was a battle she would not win, and let her new boss and landlord carry her overflowing box of paperback novels into the apartment for her. The apartment is decorated in an outdated style, but Lyra finds it cozy and full of promise. The walls in the combined living room and dining area are painted a dark shade of green, and the kitchen is a light shade of yellow that is not too bright or overbearing. There is a window in the kitchen that overlooks the back lot of Lost Fiction, which is currently only occupied by an old beat-up Chevy truck the color of robin's eggs, which must be Renford's. The furniture in the apartment is sparse, but Lyra knew this would be the case from the start. There's a leather sofa with wooden arms against one wall, and a small CRT TV with a VHS player already installed opposite. There is a DVD player sitting beside the TV on the small stand it rests upon, but Lyra knows she won't be getting much use out of the thing. She's never really been big on movies, but she appreciates the gesture nonetheless. The only bathroom is directly through the master bedroom, which has a bed frame and a brand new mattress Lyra insisted she pay for when Renford told her he would be ordering her a new one. She wasn't able to bring her own mattress with her. Jennifer kept that. Among a myriad other things Lyra is sure she will come to regret letting her keep over the coming weeks. Mostly that coffee pot she just bought a few weeks ago. And the stand mixer. She'll still spend plenty of time baking like she did before, but there will be a few moments where she will look back and think, wow, I really wish I wouldn't have let Jennifer keep everything. These moments will mostly happen when she has to knead dough by hand, which is the only reason she really bought a stand mixer in the first place. Lyra makes sure to thank Renford profusely for all his help, especially with ordering the new mattress. She knows most people who decide to just pack their bags and move away and start over from scratch don't have the privileges or opportunities she has had, and she is beyond grateful for it. Though she would never say so out loud, it has almost seemed all universally coincidental, as if, and she has laughed at this already on the long car ride here and in the weeks leading up to this day, but it almost feels as if she is meant to be here. It was by complete coincidence she even knew about the apartment listing in the first place. That morning, Jennifer had been reading a newspaper featuring the ad, and Lyra had taken notice of it when Jennifer discarded the paper on their coffee table. Before she'd left the apartment that evening, she'd grabbed the newspaper and thrown it into the box full of books she'd packed, knowing the listing was there, knowing it was a long shot that the place was even still available. When she called, after that final screaming match with Jennifer that left her stranded at the bus stop near their apartment building, holding a box of her most prized books and the suitcase she packed in a hurry, it was nearly 9 o'clock at night. She was sure the phone would just go to voicemail. In fact, she was entirely sure even if the apartment lister did pick up, they would deliver the news that the apartment was taken, and she would have to either return to her parents' home in the hills above their sleepy town, go back to Jennifer with her head bowed and allow herself to continue to be manipulated, or she could find somewhere else to be. She knew without a doubt, if the apartment was no longer available, she would never have the guts to strike out on her own. The apartment in the town she never heard of was the only chance she had. And when Mr. Bell answered the phone at 9 o'clock at night and told her the apartment was still available, Lyra knew she had no choice but to go through with this plan. There were nearly 3 weeks between that first initial call to Mr. Bell and that day she actually packed up her few belongings and left the only town she'd ever known. It took time to officially drop out of her medical program, to untangle herself from her parents' accounts, and to put everything into place so her parents could do nothing to change her mind, despite their best efforts. She has grappled with guilt and grief several times over the past few weeks, but Lyra is strong. She always has been. It's just taken her time to realize just how strong she truly is and just what she is capable of. It won't be much longer until she will face a true test of strength. But Lyra does not know this yet. Renford shows her around the apartment. "An official tour," he proclaimed, making Lyra laugh and shake her head. He reminds her of the grandfather she never had, and she's doing her best not to get too attached to him. And while there are only a few rooms to explore, the bedroom has blue wallpaper with pink pinstripes, something Lyra never would have chosen for herself, but instantly decides it suits her. Lyra finds herself full of questions by the end. "Why is there, is that sugar?" she asks, pointing to the window in the kitchen, where there is some sort of a white powdery substance lining the sill. "Oh," Renford says, clapping his hands together and nodding enthusiastically. "Right, there are a few things to cover that almost slipped my mind." Lyra raises an eyebrow, glancing from him to the sugar. "Is it sugar?" "No," he says, chuckling a little. "No, that is salt, actually. You see, Mountain Hill's a little bit of a... oh dear, I suppose you could say we're a bit superstitious. I'm not quite sure when the tradition started, but trailing all the way back as far as we can tell, the residents of Mountain Hill have always placed a bit of salt beneath their windowsills and under their doormats. It's a protective thing, I believe. Whatever the case, I would really prefer you not wipe it up, and maybe change it out every so often. It really is just a silly little thing, so I hope you don't mind." Lyra shrugs, still not quite understanding why it would matter so much. If it's just a superstition, who would know if she cleaned it up? But she agrees not to sweep it up. After all, the apartment is basically free to live in, and she has been given free rein in the bookstore below. A little salt won't matter in the long run, she thinks. "What about the horseshoe above the door?" she asks, indicating the object. "Another superstition," he says, smiling softly. The light has dimmed a little from his eyes, and Lyra briefly wonders what this means when he says, "I'd also appreciate it if you left the horseshoe up. It is a weight off my shoulders to know the traditions of our little town are followed." Lyra nods and agrees to leave the horseshoe up as well, knowing it won't affect her at all. "Okay," she says, smiling. "When would you like me downstairs?" Renford shakes his head. No, that's okay. Stay and get settled in. If you need to, run over to Sally's place, the grocer a few buildings away, and get whatever you'll need for the night. The sun sets, and oh..." He pauses, checking his watch. 3 hours and 42 minutes, so you have some time. But do try to be back before the sun goes down. It's, "Another tradition?" Lyra asks, quirking a brow. Renford nods, and now Lyra is beginning to question just how superstitious this town really is. When she asked about it on the phone, Renford said there was a population of about 200, and it had been that way as far back as the town's history went. She isn't necessarily surprised that a few superstitions have been able to grow such as they have, but the adamancy that they are followed in the modern day is just bizarre. But she agrees to return before dark, because she knows there's no sense in arguing, and she knows she won't be out past sunset anyway. She doesn't know anybody, and quite frankly, she's looking forward to exploring the bookstore as soon as she knows Renford is left for the day. It is only an hour or so later, once Renford has left the apartment and given Lyra the day to unpack her few belongings and get settled in, that Lyra finally receives a phone call. In Mountain Hill, there is no cell phone reception. Renford explained this on the phone when she first called to inquire about the apartment and said, "We have a landline already installed in the apartment, which you are free to use. Anyone who wishes to reach you can call the line anytime, day or night, though long-distance calls do cost a little extra. We'd prefer you not to make too many of those." Lyra is grateful to have an excuse not to call out of the apartment too often. The only people she is likely to call are also the only people with the ability to talk her into coming home, to move away from the strange town they've never heard of, and return to school to get back on track to finishing her medical degree. She wishes her parents did not have the ability to sway her so easily. But this is the way it has always been, and until Jennifer's betrayal, Lyra has never felt strong enough to make choices on her own. But as the phone rings, the little screen on the landline telephone claiming to be a number she has had memorized since she was much younger, Lyra knows if she doesn't pick up now, they'll just keep calling her. So she answers with a brisk, "Hey, don't take that tone with me, Lorana Lynette Myers," her mother, Savannah Myers, says in the haughtiest tone she can manage. "I'm just worried about you, you know." Lyra winces, feeling the guilt already stirring in her gut. "I know, Mom, I'm sorry. I've been pretty busy, and it has been a long day of driving to get here." "Well, who do you expect is to blame for that?" she asks, her tone dry and condescending as ever. "Your father and I told you this would be a mistake, but you never want to listen to us." Lyra sighs, plopping down on the couch, which is surprisingly comfy. She imagines she will fall asleep here many nights in a row, a good book in hand, music quietly playing on her headphones. Her mother's shrill voice knocks her out of her daydreams. "Come home, Lorana. I know you're still sore about Jennifer, but—" "Sore?" Lyra demands incredulously, sitting up swiftly. "Mom, she was stealing from me. She stole nearly $3,000 from me, and on top of that, as if that weren't worse enough, she was cheating on me. And you say I'm sore, as if she didn't nearly destroy me." Savannah is silent for a moment, though Lyra can sense through the phone line her growing temper. Lyra has a temper like her mother's, a red-hot branding iron that, if not wielded efficiently, will destroy everything it touches. Her mother has honed her anger into a sharp blade, while Lyra's is more like the bludgeoning bow of a softball bat. Fast and dangerous when used incorrectly, but effective nonetheless. Lyra prepares herself for the coming blow, but Savannah merely says, "Come home, Lorana. We've received the message loud and clear. Your tantrum has gone on long enough with this moving to a town no one has heard of or ever even been to. Did you know, your father and I searched for this place on the internet and found nothing, so we decided to pull out an atlas. An actual atlas, Lorana. And still we could not find the town on the map. What possibly made you believe this was a good idea?" "The fact that it got me hundreds of miles away from you and away from Jennifer," Lyra thinks, but does not say. "I know what's best for me." "What is best for you," Savannah interrupts, setting Lyra's teeth to grind, "is to come home and return to your studies. Tell your counselor you had a minor mental break if you need, whatever it takes. Your father and I will stand by you no matter what, but just come home." Lyra almost believes the desperate plea in her mother's voice, but she knows this is just a ploy. She knows if she allows herself to bend even 1 inch toward what her mother wants, she will do all she is told, and she is not that person anymore. Lyra rises from the couch, feeling that earlier strength returning to her in waves, crashing against her heart and soul and giving her the courage to say, "No, Mother. I'm staying here, I won't return to school, and I certainly will not return to Jennifer. Is that clear?" Savannah sighs. "When you change your mind, we will be here. We love you, Lorana. Just know we truly only want what is best for you." The phone clicks before Lyra can respond, and she is left standing in her new living room, staring at the horseshoe hanging above the door and thinking, "What have I gotten myself into?" Lyra stands before the door to the bookstore and takes a deep breath, staring down at the keys in her hands. She's just returned from the grocery store, which has 2 employees, Sally, who owns the store, and Carrick, her grandson, who was reading a magazine the entire time she was there, not looking up even once, which Lyra could respect that bored teenage game, even if it was also slightly annoying. Lyra has another hour or so before the sun goes down, but even still, her evening plans include perusing the inventory of lost fiction, selecting a new book to read, and huddling down in her new bed. Or on the couch, honestly, that thing is so comfortable. And reading until her eyes slide shut on their own. A perfect end to a pretty okay day, save the exasperating phone call with her mother. Lyra has decided she will not think of said phone call anymore. She knows if she allows her mother's words to settle, they will fester, until they become an ugly, rotten thing that drives her back home and out of her new independency. With a click, the door is unlocked, and Lyra pushes it open gently, taking in the room around her. The lights are off, saving one in a closet she had not noticed earlier. She wonders if Renford just forgot to turn it off, or if he left it on intentionally, and decides on the latter. He probably knew she would be down here at some point tonight, and she's grateful for it. Lyra slips into the room, shutting the door leading to her apartment behind her. She is wearing her favorite pair of slippers. They are an ugly shade of blue, but they are the most comfortable thing she has ever owned, and paired with her joggers and crop top, she feels at home, and that is all that matters. Lyra makes her way through the shelves of paperbacks. It appears that while she was settling in above and picking up groceries, Renford was working to unpack the several boxes of books they brought from upstairs. There are precarious stacks lined against any open surface, which mostly means the counter she will sit at most of her days is more book than counter at this point. She makes a plan to go through the shelves in the coming weeks and organize things better, though she can't imagine there is enough room anywhere in this entire store for any more books. Ever since she was young, Lyra has always enjoyed reading. Her childhood was spent between the pages of books of all types: fantasy, romance, sci-fi, history, reference books, anything she could get her hands on. She began collecting books when she was 4 years old. The first dollar she remembers being given for a lost tooth was spent on a used and well-loved paperback copy of The Shining by Stephen King. She was too young to understand the story, but she spent hours a day flipping through the pages, learning every word she could. She remembers days when she had the book open on her lap, and beside her on the couch, a dictionary she could use to look up words she didn't understand. Lyra still has that copy of The Shining, which is also the only book she did not pack in her box. That one is always in her purse, always close to her heart. Now, as Lyra searches the shelves, she finds a few books she has not read by Stephen King, and a few by Neil Gaiman, another author she adores. She turns them sideways on the shelves, marking their spaces so she can easily find them later when she has books to put in their places. Lost Fiction only accepts used books, but Renford has a take-one-leave-one policy, which means oftentimes, folks will come into the store with a book they've just read, search the shelves until they find something new to read, and swap the books without paying anything. Lyra wondered about this business practice when she first learned about it, and asked how the store makes money. Renford explained, "It makes enough money to keep the doors open and the lights on, and so long as that is the case, I'm happy." It takes Lyra nearly half an hour to make her way through the tiny store, and she still knows there are things she missed. She decides on 5 books to check out for now, and heads upstairs to pick 5 books out of her box she brought with her. She chooses a copy of The Fireman by Joe Hill, who is the son of Stephen King, which she was delighted to learn after reading his works, a copy of Soul Survivor by Dean Koontz, and the entire Lives of the Mayfair Witches trilogy by Anne Rice. She has read all of these a few times, and owns multiple copies of the latter, so she isn't too disheartened to put them on the shelves for others to enjoy. Before heading back downstairs, Lyra grabs her headphones and puts them in, turning on the playlist she made for the drive up here. Fortunately, despite there being no cellular connection, she had the foresight to download a few podcasts and audiobooks, as well as every single playlist she has ever made, so she'll have plenty of things to listen to until the next time she heads out into civilization. It is strange how easy it is for her to accept the way things are in this town. There is no cellular data, which 2 months ago would have seemed like the end of the world, but now, with the idea that no one can contact her without going through an extreme amount of effort, Lyra feels free for the first time in her 25 years of life. She moves about the store on silent feet, humming along to Iron and Wine as she goes. Lyra is unaware of another presence in the room until someone taps on her shoulder, causing her to let out an ungodly shriek as she jumps, spitting and dropping the book she has collected. A small woman in her late 60s with dark skin and graying hair stands a few feet away, her hands raised, a wicked grin on her face. Without even needing to ask, Lyra knows this must be Mrs. Bell. Who else would be here this close to dark? Mrs. Bell says something, and Lyra realizes she still has her headphones in. She quickly tugs them out of her ears, tucking them into the front of her shirt and apologizing profusely. "Whoa, whoa," Mrs. Bell says, laughing and shaking her head. "No need for that. I'm the one who scared you. I didn't realize you had your ears in." Lyra's brows climb up her forehead, but she says nothing. That is a phrase she has never heard before. "Renford said you'd likely be down here, and I wanted to stop by and say hello before we head out to our cottage," Mrs. Bell says, holding out her hand. Lyra accepts and shakes it, smiling slightly despite having just had her heart scared right out of her body. "I'm Mrs. Bell. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Lorana." "It's just Lyra," she corrects her. "My mom named me after her great-aunt or something. The name is super pretty, but it just never suited me." Lyra bites her lip, stopping the word vomit in its tracks before it gets any worse. Mrs. Bell takes us in stride and just nods, though, undisturbed by Lyra's rambling. "Well, it is very nice to meet you, Lyra. I brought you a pie, and I wanted to make sure you truly didn't have any dietary restrictions. I love my husband, but sometimes he can be the most forgetful man on this great green earth of ours." Lyra laughs, feeling more and more at ease with Mrs. Bell. "No, I don't have any restrictions. Except peas, though I'm not really one to complain. If you bring me free food, who am I to complain about what may or may not be in it?" Mrs. Bell chuckles and shakes her head. "That's alright. I don't much like peas either, if I'm being honest. Or tomatoes. Those things are just absolutely despicable." Lyra pretends to be affronted. "I can't believe you don't like tomatoes." "Tomatoes are the bane of my existence," Mrs. Bell says, laughing. "Anyway, darling, my husband told you the rules of the house?" Lyra nods. "Don't clean up the salt, leave the horseshoe above the door, and don't go out after dark. The first two things are just town superstitions, but there is a town-wide curfew Sheriff Thornton put in place. Everyone must be indoors before the sun sets." "The sheriff made it a curfew?" Lyra asks, a little shocked. "That seems extreme." "That's Tilly for you," Mrs. Bell says, smiling softly. There's a glint to her eye, as if she has a secret she isn't telling Lyra, something Lyra desperately wishes to know. "Actually, that is the best possible word to describe our dear Tilly. Extreme. A hard ass." Mrs. Bell's eyes open wide and she glances around conspiratorially. "Don't tell her I said so, though. She's a real sweetheart if he can get past that exterior of hers." Lyra wants to ask, in what wild situation would I be speaking with the town sheriff? But decides against it. The town is pretty small after all, and she might have run into this Tilly earlier in the day and never known it. She suspects she'll meet every resident of Mountain Hill eventually. "I won't tell her," Lyra says. "Now, not to be, rude or anything, but you should be getting out of here, right? The sun goes down soon." Mrs. Bell glances at the front door, where she can see the shadows growing larger and larger on Ashton Avenue. She nods her head sadly, then looks at Lyra once more. "Don't go outside tonight, no matter what you may or may not hear. There are strange things in these woods, Lyra, and it's best you steer clear of all that mess, you understand?" Her voice is extremely dire, and Lyra feels her stomach sink to her toes. For the second time today she finds herself wondering, what have I gotten myself into? But she merely nods and says, "I'll stay in tonight, no problem." Mrs. Bell, appearing satisfied with that answer, gestures to the counter. "That over there's the chicken pot pie. Sans peas, of course, and there should be some silverware in the drawers upstairs. Eat it soon. It's still pretty hot, but it'll cool quick." Lyra agrees to eat the pot pie as soon as she gets back upstairs, and she walks Mrs. Bell to the front door. Just as she pushes the door open, Mrs. Bell turns to face Lyra. Her eyes, which had been a deep brown just a moment before, appear to be almost gray as she says, "Stay inside tonight, Lyra. And one more thing, if you go into the forest, please stay on this side of the yellow wildflowers. Any further is too dangerous. Understand?" Lyra nods, swallowing thickly as fear courses its way through her. "I understand. You're a good girl," Mrs. Bell says, nodding definitively. "You're gonna do good work here, Miss Lyra Myers. You are what this town needs." Before Lyra can ask what the old woman means, she is gone, the door shut and locked behind her. It is nearly 10 p.m. when Lyra is getting ready for bed. She has been in her pajamas for hours now, but her bed is not made and she cannot find her copy of The Shining anywhere. It isn't in her purse and it isn't in her box of books. She even went downstairs to check the shelves, finding a different copy, but not her copy. She would have been fine, could have even slept through the night without the damn thing, if she hadn't looked in her purse for a bottle of pain reliever she needed to clear up a headache forming behind her eyes. She found the pain reliever, but the book was nowhere to be found. Now, Lyra finds herself standing once more on the threshold. She stands before the door to the shop, nervously biting the skin next to her thumbnail, willing herself to just calm down and go to sleep. It feels as though a limb has been cut off, not having her book in her hand. She would have been just fine had she not noticed it was missing, but this is the one thing she cannot live without, her security blanket. It's just superstitious nonsense, she mutters, dropping her hand to hover by the lock on the door. I can quickly run out to my car, grab the book, and run back in. No one will even notice I'm outside, and it'll be fine. This town is weird, and the people here are strange, but that's it. They're just superstitious weirdos with big hearts. Even as she says the words, Lyra knows in her gut she would be better off staying inside. She knows it is silly to get this worked up over a book that she literally found a duplicate of 5 minutes ago, but it's her book. I'll be quick, she tells herself, turning the lock and pulling the door open. Lyra ducks her head out, glancing up and down Ashton Avenue, making sure the coast is clear. There's no one out at this hour, especially not with the curfew in place, and she feels safe enough to go. Her 1953 DeSoto Fire Dome is parked behind Lost Fiction now, at Renford's request, but the lock on the back door of the building jams on occasion, so he told her it's easier for her to go around the building than go through the back. She takes a deep breath before pulling the door open all the way and stepping outside into the chilly night air. She should have grabbed a jacket, but, she reminds herself, she's going to be quick about this. She's just going to run back to her car, grab the book out of the center console where she is positive she must have accidentally said it earlier, and quickly run back. She played softball for nearly 14 years. She can do this. Lyra speed walks around the building, following the alley between the bookstore and the laundromat next door to the rear of the businesses. Her cherry red car sits right where she left it, and she feels a sense of relief wash over her. It is only 6 feet away now, and she half walks, half runs the remaining distance, sliding her key into the lock on the door and unlocking it. She pulls it open and ducks inside, immediately spotting her copy of The Shining on the passenger seat. Strange, Lyra thinks as she picks it up. She never leaves this book just lying around. It is always tucked somewhere safe and sound, out of the sun and out of reach of people she doesn't trust with it. She figures it must have fallen out of her purse earlier, though she cannot imagine how that happened, and shrugs. She can worry about it tomorrow. Lyra takes care to shut the car door quietly, making sure it doesn't slam and echo all the way down Ashton Avenue. She is just about to turn and head back toward the front door of the store, feeling totally successful in her super-secret stealth mission, when she hears a deep growl come from behind her. Every muscle in her body locks up, and Lyra hugs her book tightly to her chest, suddenly realizing this book totally isn't worth facing whatever the hell it is behind her. It's probably just a bear, she thinks, as she hears the telltale sound of nails clicking on pavement. A big bear, who will definitely leave you alone if you don't make any sudden movements. The sound of the clicking draws closer, the growls growing louder and deeper. Soon, Lyra feels the little hairs on the back of her neck stir and she shivers, knowing whatever it is behind her is mere feet away now. You have to face it, she thinks. Don't die a coward, Lyra. Especially not when you were an absolute idiot and came out after curfew, even after being warned like 1,000,000 times. The growling stops, but Lyra knows whatever stands behind her is still there. Its hulking shadow has covered her now, drowning out the ambient light from the surrounding businesses and the full moon. Just turn around, face what stands behind you, and try not to scream. Lyra takes a deep breath, closes her eyes, and spins slowly to face her fate. The growling picks up again once she has spun all the way around, and Lyra slowly peels open one eye, peeking at the thing and taking in as much detail as she can. The beast stands nearly double her height, which is quite a feat considering Lyra stands at 6'2". It has massive paws with long, curling claws that are caked in dirt and debris from the forest. It has the maw of a bear, but the fur trimming of a lion's mane, and the body of a bull? Lyra's eyes open all the way now, and yep, that is definitely the body of a bull. What the hell are you? She murmurs, slowly dragging her gaze from its chest up to its face until she meets its eyes. A pair of glowing red irises meet hers, and Lyra can't help herself. She opens her mouth and mutters, "Well, fuck," and the beast attacks. This has been Mountain Hill Radio. I'm just a woman, alone in a radio tower, speaking into the void and hoping that somebody hears me. I hope whoever you are, that you are somewhere warm and safe, and that you remember you are never alone. I'm always here with you, your constant companion, into the late dark hours of night. Tune in next time to find out what happens to our new friend Lyra, and remember, everything you've heard is absolutely fictional. There are no monsters roaming the streets, and under absolutely no circumstances is it okay to leave your house after curfew. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Mountain Hill Radio, a fictional podcast written and produced by Raven Roe. All music is written and produced by Zach Bradshaw or Nautilus of the Tide on all music platforms. Episodes of Mountain Hill Radio will be released bi-weekly. Episode 2 will be up and available for listening on Monday, October 4th, 2021. Make sure to check out my various social medias by searching for Mountain Hill Radio Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, or by searching for Mountain Hill Radio Pod on TikTok. Also make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you are listening to this now to ensure that you get new episodes as they become available. Without you to listen, there would be no reason for this podcast to exist, so I thank you from the very bottom of my heart for listening.